Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the MMA webinar series. Today, we're going to talk about measurement, and we're going to bust some myths. Today's title: Debunking the 6 Myths of Location-Based Measurement. This is brought to you by NinthDecimal, one of our members, and we look forward to this presentation. But before we do that, let me go over just a few points about the MMA. As many of you know, MMA is an 800-member plus global trade organization focused on all aspects of mobile. We serve the chief marketers, and our reason for being is to accelerate the transformation and innovation of marketing through mobile, driving business growth with closer and stronger consumer engagement. We do that by leaning on our strategic priorities: cultivating inspiration, building capabilities for success, demonstrating measurement and impact, today's topic, and advocacy. Among our members, we have American Express, Ninth Decimal, Group M, P&G, the weather company, Walmart, Google, Facebook, and others. We are now about 35+% of our members are brand marketers, and everything we try to do is to help educate and enlighten the brand marketers. Today, we will always field questions by the end of the webinar. In the control panel on your right, you can insert questions into the drop-down menu, and we'll be happy to answer some or all of those at the end. If your questions are not addressed during the webinar, do know that the sponsor gets the questions and will get back to you with answers as appropriate. There are 2 questions that everybody asks, and we get those answers right away. Will the presentation be shared, and will the webinar be available for later viewing? The answer to both is yes. And within the next 48 hours, everyone who's registered for the webinar will receive a follow-up email with links to both. During the course of the presentation, feel free to share your insights by using the hashtag NMAWeb. To get it started, I'm Leo Sullen, the moderator and the VP of Industry Programs here at the MMA, and our speakers today will be Ryan Kanterman, the Executive Director of Strategic Measurement Partnerships at NinthDecimal, and joining him is his colleague Neftali Goldsmith, the VP of Product at NinthDecimal. And now I'd be happy to turn it over to Ryan Kanterman.
Thank you very much, Leo. As Leo said, I'm the Executive Director of Strategic Measurement Partnerships here at NinthDecimal, which essentially means that I work with clients every day to measure the impact of their advertising on real-world behavior. So when you think about measurement on a holistic level, it's really the act of comparing one thing to another. You measure height to compare who's taller. When you measure distance, you're comparing the length to every distance you've traveled. And marketers measure to compare performance from one campaign or tactic to another. But in an omni-channel world, the practice of measuring to compare becomes a lot more challenging. Each media type looks at different KPIs to judge performance. So with mobile and desktop, you have impressions, you have click-through rate, video completion rate, and other engagement rates. For TV, you have things like GRPs and brand recall. Some of these metrics are more meaningful than others, but without the ability to compare apples to apples, marketers are left without the ability to make results-based decisions. What marketers really need is a consistent, meaningful metric that spans both online and offline media.
Hi, I'm Neftali Goldsmith, Vice President of Data Measurement Products for NinthDecimal. So most people associate location data with geofencing, taking real-time users, targeting them based on their proximity to a given location. That's a great start and a good use of location data, but there's much more that type of data can do for us, especially in the area of bridging online and offline media. Since 94% of retail sales still take place in store, it is essential to find tactics that give us a complete picture of consumers. For example, identifying and reaching location-based audiences, knowing who people are based on where they go, and to be able to activate those not only on their mobile devices, but across their devices, across the media. Resolving online and offline profiles in order to attribute digital media exposure with in-store behaviors. This is a really important step we're going to talk more about later. And finally, understanding offline behavior as a true mobile-first signal that gives us the ability to do holistic audience planning, activation, and measurement. Here's a real-world example of a case study for Quiznos that shows the value of location data for understanding the online effect on the offline effect of online media. Here in this situation for Quiznos came to us with a goal: drive store traffic for a specific segment. In this case, we're talking about a millennial male audience. The strategy was across device and cross media, video and display, desktop, mobile, and measure not only the effect that the digital media had on foot traffic into the store, but the incremental effect, how much more foot traffic happened because of the exposure at over 680 locations nationwide. The results were that we reached over 8 million unique devices and saw a 29% incremental lift from the campaign. And when we say incremental lift, that's LCI, Location Conversion Index, our proprietary methodology for measuring incremental foot traffic. Also interesting that for mobile alone, 40% lift, incremental lift, showing the validity not only of the media allocation in general, but the value of the mobile spend specifically. And if we had more time, we could get into even more interesting details when you break it down on which publisher, which video, which creative had that highest performance.
So we can see how that kind of insight can be incredibly powerful. Because offline attribution is so very needed in the industry, there are a lot of players out there that are trying to solve it. And I spend a lot of time talking to folks in the industry about what's possible and what's not. And there are definitely a few misconceptions and myths floating around. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with location-based measurement offerings, and you've also likely heard or even said yourself one of these 6 myths. So let's go through them. The first myth: it's impossible to tell whether a person actually visited or was just nearby. Number 2, the sample size is too small and not representative of my full customer base. Number 3, separate studies are required for each medium, which makes omnichannel measurement all but impossible. Number 4, partners are only capable of measuring their own media. Number 5, location-based measurement is not as actionable as sales data. And number 6, it's too much of a hassle to set up a measurement study. I'm already swamped with just running media.
Okay, let's dive in. Myth 1. It's impossible to tell whether a person actually visited or was just nearby. To understand what's possible and how close and how precise we can get, it helps to first understand where the data that we're working with comes from in the first place. Where does it come from, and how can it be relied upon as a legitimate signal? So data comes from mobile phones, specifically mobile phones and tablets with apps installed, because apps have access to the device GPS services, location services, often giving a more accurate location signal that can be tracked. When a person installs an app, they have to give explicit permission as the image on the screen. Allow the app to use location services. In addition, when the location services permission is granted, the user has one of 3 options. Let your location services happen always when this app is on, never, not even when the app is on, or sometimes only when the app is on. Once the location services have been given for a particular app, based on that app's permission levels, then the device, the antennae inside of the device, are open to receive coordinate signals from cell towers, global satellites, Wi-Fi, beacons, and device hardware. Now, that yields trillions of data points. And the problem that companies like ours have is not finding enough data to use. We have too much data to use. The challenge is finding which data is the best data, the most reliable data, the good data that can be relied upon. There is a lot of, we see up to 20 to 40% of data that we use, meaning we will throw out over 60 to 80% of the location data that comes in per day. And what are the causes of some of these sort of bad location signals? Things called centroids. Oftentimes that is the center lat long of a state or a zip code. If someone registers in an app and they give their home state or their home address, and there is a county or a zip code or a state, oftentimes that app will pass the centroid, the center of that zip code or state, as the location signal. Sometimes the location signals are mistaken. They're switched. They don't make sense. The lat is where the long should be and the long is where the lat should be. Sometimes they're truncated. They don't give us enough decimal points to be able to understand with precision. And sometimes we lack what's called horizontal accuracy, where we're not able to lock in on the signal long enough to understand where a person truly is within a zone of error. So the ability to identify a location signal and to truly understand where that person is, it makes a big difference. In this real world example, we have two buildings. We have someone who is eating lunch and someone who is drinking their lunch. And they could be less than 100 meters apart. And we want to make sure that when we locate that user and put them into our system, we want to make sure that we're giving them the appropriate location tag. We understand who this person is, what type of profile attribute we should be including. But how can we be sure with these location signals so close together, how can we be sure who is eating at a Chinese restaurant and who is drinking at an Irish bar at 12 o'clock on a Wednesday? So the important thing to understand is that we start with a user-based signal that verifies a user to a precise accuracy of down to 4 feet, optimizing towards 5 decimal points of horizontal accuracy. Once we have that user with a known lat long, we are able then to say, where does that lat long exist? Within what boundary, within what mapped boundary does that user exist? Some in our space will overlay circle radii from a point radius. Others will lay down a 100 by 100 meter grid and say any lat long found in this tile versus that tile, we can contextualize. NinthDecimal has been an industry leader and known for its ability to define individual stored boundaries, complex polygons, not just for geofencing, but for any visit that we measure, whether it's for audience building or measurement. So our system verifies the precision of the incoming signal, where that person is, and the precise accuracy within the 4 walls of the establishment, what real-world context can be applied to that user in that place. So with that level of accuracy, down to 4 feet within the walls, we are able to know when someone is just merely walking by on a sidewalk or actually visiting a location. So we say it is possible to tell whether a person visited or nearby. Myth number 1, busted.
Moving on to myth number 2. The sample size is too small and not representative of my full customer base. If you're thinking of this, you're probably thinking of panel-based measurement approaches. To quickly define what that means, there's a number of players in the industry who gather location data through one or a handful of apps for a small group of users. And the sample size concern is a valid one with these approaches. These companies boast that they could see 1 in every 100 US smartphone users, which sounds great, but just translates to 1%. What you have to ask yourself, is this really representative of your audience? Something else to consider is that many of these panel apps incentivize users in some way to participate. This helps them boost app usage, but it also leads to selection bias. Are the people who use this app the same demographic as the people you want to reach with your campaign? So for an example, if you have a campaign where you are a luxury automobile dealer or manufacturer and you're trying to reach people with 250K plus household income and you want to measure the effectiveness of your media in driving them to dealerships, you better make sure that your sample is going to be representative of the people that you're reaching, 250K plus household income. So are there going to be a lot of people with that type of demographic that are part of incentivized panels? These are the questions you need to ask yourself. In addition, these incentives can lead to skewed behavior and reporting. If someone is incentivized to visit a location in some way or to say that they did, it may actually affect their behavior in a way that is not attributable to your advertising. So in the end, you have to consider how a small sample size may impact your measurement. How many people were exposed to your ad are actually members of this panel? And is that number large enough to provide statistically significant insights without heavy modeling? On the other hand, impression-based solutions collect data across the entire mobile app ecosystem at the moment of an ad call, observing 100 times more unique users than the leading panel. There are a number of benefits to this type of approach, such as massive scale, allowing for one-to-one matching between exposed and control groups. Passive and unbiased measurement. In any research, you really want to be in the business of observing and not asking. And is a sample large enough for statistical significance? Massive scale is critical to calculating statistically sound results, especially when you start cutting and slicing data by tactic, by audience, by medium, digital versus TV versus people exposed to both digital and TV, etc. So it's also crucial to consider what partners are doing with that massive scale. And this is really where specifics of their methodology becomes extremely important. If you have the proper scale, you can not only understand how consumers' behavior changes before and after seeing an ad, but you could compare that behavioral change to someone who looks otherwise identical but did not see an ad. This exposed to control matching needs to be really, really tight to provide actionable and reliable insights into incremental lift, and is often based on demographics like age, gender, and household income. But at NinthDecimal, we match on a lot more attributes to give even tighter groupings, including psychographics like are they a business traveler or sports enthusiast. Also matching on cross-device profiles, which is something you might not even consider. If you're reaching someone or exposing someone on a desktop ad, you might want to make sure that the control person that you find to measure against also has a desktop computer too. We also match on historical visit behavior and frequency. So, for example, if Leo normally visits your store once per week, you're going to want to compare his behavior to someone who also normally visits once per week. This way, if Leo and, let's say, Naftali both visit twice as often during your campaign, but only Leo saw your ad, you know that the increased visits can't really be attributed to your campaign. This tight matching ensures that you're factoring out seasonality and other reasons why visits may increase anyway. This close level of matching isn't possible if you don't have the scale to find identical people who weren't exposed to the ad. But with that scale that comes from an impression-based approach, you can create really specific control groups to ensure that you're only measuring true incremental lift that's attributable to your advertising. So myth number 2, busted.
Myth number 3, separate studies are required for each medium, which makes omni-channel measurement all but impossible. So omni-channel measurement and attribution models are definitely growing in sophistication and adoption, but there are challenges that still exist to identifying single users across addressable channels. Location precision is now being applied to residential households as it has been traditionally applied to retail visits. We're now able to associate with equal precision phone usage and user visitation or user dwell within a residential area. This is an exciting step that enables identification of these very same users across devices, TV sets, mobile phones, desktop computers, tablets, and across data sources, first-party brand data, public census data, purchase data, TV viewing data, automotive ownership data, etc. So by resolving users to households and associating devices to those users and deduping those users across their devices, and not only across their devices, but even their in-app IDs, something as small as an app ID, different publishers might hash what's called encrypt, sort of like obfuscate the advertising ID using different formulas. So the same user can exist from different publishers with completely different app ID, advertiser IDs, and to a measurement system and to an exposure ad server may look like two different people and can cause inflated numbers. The idea of a true mobile-first DMP that can dedupe devices against users associated to household, it allows us to measure each user across their exposures and their visitation in a deduped one-to-one manner. So deep integrations with industry data management platforms, Acxiom, Experian, Adobe, etc., enable seamless activation across channels as part of larger brand data strategies. While measuring in-store visitation and foot traffic has kind of grown in popularity based on it being a mobile tactic, give me a real-world KPI for mobile, when you think about it, really the primary media that drives the store is television commercials. For decades, TV commercials have been getting people to go into store. Now they do support online purchase as well, but it has always been a primary drive to store coming from the TV level. So now the ideal is that we can understand, starting with a household TV viewership and exposure to media, from there connecting to desktop, mobile, tablet, other addressable identifiers across other addressable devices, being able to understand the whole picture, how a media mix affects success. These studies are not limited to foot traffic only. We're able to understand how this multimedia mix affects not only foot traffic, but plus purchase data and closed-loop in-store sales. And the measurement isn't siloed. We can look at an intersection of all these channels together in aggregate, or the overlapping of just TV and mobile, or just desktop and TV. We are working with our most advanced clients to compare performance across media channels and identify the right mix to most effectively drive in-store metrics. And now Ryan is going to take us through the sample omni-channel client case study.
So let's take a look at a real-world example. Recently, we worked closely with Swarovski. They were running a campaign for digital, out-of-home, and print media to drive people into their stores during and around Mother's Day. So NinthDecimal, we were able to use LCI to measure the effectiveness of each of those mediums individually, and also look at the intersection of people that were exposed to multiple mediums. And what we found was that overall this campaign drove 25% lift in incremental visitation. And when you looked at the people who were exposed to both digital and out-of-home, we actually saw over a 2 times higher lift being derived from that particular audience. So really powerful, really actionable metrics that will help enforce and help figure out media mix modeling for future campaigns and optimizations.
So we see myth 3, busted.
Myth number 4, partners are only capable of measuring their own media. So I think this used to be the case maybe a year, 2 years ago, where individual companies were providing their own metrics. A lot of media entities are still doing this today, but you don't have to. Now with LCI specifically, we're able to measure across 200 certified and verified publishers across the digital landscape, not only with digital, but we have relationships with TV data partners and out-of-home providers and print publications, so that when you go to measure a campaign, you're not having siloed performance and having to figure out directionally, well, maybe mobile helped drive most visitation with out-of-home, just looking at separate studies. Now you can look across the channels, omni-channel, to understand which publishers help drive performance, which mediums help drive performance, and you can work with a holistic measurement solution like NinthDecimal's LCI. That one, pretty easy to bust. Number 4, partners only capable of measuring their own media, absolutely busted.
Myth 5, location-based measurement is not as actionable as sales data. People take their phones everywhere they go. A location context can provide a full perspective on not only what the user purchases, but their entire consumer journey. The path to purchase has a number of key touch points that can be identified by location data. Purchase intent. Are they shopping around multiple stores all of a sudden in the same topic area, in the same category? Competitive visits. Are they visiting a store and its competitors all of a sudden, or over a set frequency? In-store visits and increased frequency. Are all of a sudden they showing up to the same store more often than they usually are? Offline browsing behavior. Where else do they go? Concerts, stadiums, parks, traveling. Where else do they go that give an insight into things they are doing or might be doing soon? And when you take this location data and you couple it with the other data layers that are available, again, online browsing behavior, TV exposure, purchase data, You get the most complete view of the consumer and the consumer journey, including both online and offline stops. And not only do you see the journey, we have the ability to influence it at various steps along the way. Location intelligence can be used in flight to optimize media allocations, while purchase data alone is usually delivered well past the campaign. And in fact, one of the key indicators that we see is new store openings as an example. To see how well a new store opening is doing for a QSR for retail, relying on purchase data to give them a signal can take months, after campaign or after the opening. But foot traffic, with all the hype leading up to a new store opening, we can often tell within a week or two how things are going at a new location. In addition, when we look at customers who visit but don't purchase, this is something that we're all well aware of as digital marketers from years ago when people were first building online e-commerce sites. And the first online ads were driving people to site visits and landing pages, but there oftentimes were low conversion rates. And because of those low conversion rates, that's what drove UX designers and site page redesign and navigation design to recognize you've got to make it easy for people once they're on location. In-store is no different. Getting people, using media to drive people to store, but if people aren't converting, maybe there's a problem with the product mix. Maybe the in-store promotion isn't clear. Maybe the store personnel aren't reaching out with good customer service. So it can be an indicator. High visitation, low sales, with it might be an indication that something has to change within the customer in-store experience. And in addition, it might not have anything to do with the in-store experience. There are people out there who are coming into store to check out products and then going home to buy online. We are working with some of our more advanced customers to identify those showroomers who are coming into the store, trying things on, getting a size, getting a style, and going online, and being able to make a connection between that in-store visit and the subsequent online sale. Here's another example where visitation data can enhance purchase data. I can tell a personal story that I remember a number of years ago at a previous job. It was the day of our holiday party, and I heard a radio ad on the way to work for Olive Garden. And I decided that what we all needed to do before our holiday party was load up on breadsticks and salad, and so that we were ready and raring to go for our holiday party that night. And so when I got to work that day, I convinced a bunch of people, let's go to the Olive Garden. Let's go have our lunch there. We're going to prepare ourselves there. So here's a group of people. We're all in New York City. We've seen the outdoor signage. Some saw the radio ads. Maybe some saw a digital campaign. So maybe people were exposed. But at that visit, only one person paid the check. That would have been me. So if you're relying on purchase data at restaurants or at movies, and all you're doing, and you're relying on purchase data exclusively, you're missing all of the other consumers and users who are coming along. Visitation data can reveal the full picture of who is experiencing your brand and who may have been driven there by advertising campaign, while purchase data is limited to just those paying the check. So for these examples, we believe that this myth 5 is also busted. Location-based measurement is not as actionable as the sales data. It actually is actionable and is a great enhancement to sales data.
Moving on to our final myth, it's too much of a hassle to set up a measurement study. I'm already swamped with just running media. So absolutely hear that all the time, but this is definitely an easy one to bust. I hear the need for easy, worry-free solutions all the time. NinthDecimal's measurement solution, LCI, or Location Conversion Index, is architected to be incredibly simple to implement into the existing media operations flow. For digital ads, we simply provide a lightweight 1x1 pixel, which is fired on any impression. There's also server-to-server and file import options that are available, whichever is easiest to you and the brand. There's a team of dedicated account managers who do all the back-end work for you on our end, getting everything set up, and also deliver managed service reporting after every campaign. However, you will also have the ability to look at real-world, real-time dashboards showing foot traffic lift results intra-campaign, updated on a weekly cadence. to help you make optimization decisions, not just after campaigns end, but also in flight. I know we've already made this point, but it really is crucial to find a partner whose methodology and process you trust to deliver actual, actionable results. Running measurement studies is a lot easier when you feel confident in the data science and the methodology behind the study. So with that, myth number 6 is busted as well.
So now that we've gone over these 6 myths, here are the key takeaways which we hope you'll take with you. Location data is crucial to solving the problems of offline attribution, but you need a sophisticated solution to make it actionable. First, precision. Remove inaccurate data points and understand exactly where people are. Scale. Use enough data to ensure a representative sample and create tightly matched control groups. Incrementality. Rely on a data science-backed methodology that focuses on finding the visits that were actually driven by advertising. User-centric. Connect user behavior across devices and channels for the most accurate view of attributed lift. Partner integration. Choose a solution that can calculate lift across the media ecosystem. And ease of use. Simplify the process of setting up campaigns and accessing insights, and working with a team that is ready and willing to help.
We mentioned our measurement solution, LCI, which again stands for Location Conversion Index. We didn't get to spend a lot of time today talking about our specific offering, but if you are interested in learning more, please don't hesitate to shoot me an email directly or reach out directly to LCI hotline at NinthDecimal.com. All of those emails will go directly to me and my team, so even if you want to just say hey or tell us how much you love the presentation, please, again, don't hesitate to reach out. So thank you, everyone, so much for joining. I hope you found this interesting and informative. A lot of the content from this webinar came from a playbook we recently released, and we'll be emailing it out to everyone who attended. So keep an eye out for that. And with that, I'll turn it back to Leo to see if we had any questions come in.
Thanks, Ryan, and thanks, Naftali. Very good presentation, very good format with the Mythbusters approach. Yes, we do have a number of questions. I think I'm going to give you a softball first. How did you connect the digital and out-of-home devices together? Did you use a third party for the connection or use a NinthDecimal solution?
For out-of-home specifically?
Yeah, how did you connect the digital and out-of-home devices together? How did you make that match?
Yeah, so since we're able to look at where people are in the physical world, we were provided with a list of those out-of-home units, where they exist in the physical plane, latitude, longitude provided by the agencies that we worked with. And from there, we can see what users are within close proximity to those billboards or bus shelter terminals or spectaculars, different types of billboards and units that were used, understanding the exposure based on the actual latitude, longitude we see from those unique users in the physical world. And then from there, we're able to match them back to our massive location graph platform, where we can look at where those people have been historically and where they go after that point of ad exposure to help understand whether or not that advertisement, that tactic was actually impactful in driving people to go into the advertiser's locations incrementally more than they would normally go.
Okay. Here's a question that kind of gets at validity, and it has there ever been an LCI result that did not prove a lift for the advertiser, incremental lift for the advertiser?
All the time. All the time.
All the time?
So
yeah, okay.
There are plenty of instances where we see that either a specific campaign overall was ineffective in changing people's visitation behavior to a particular store, had to work directly with the agency or brand to go over what could have caused that if it was maybe a smaller campaign. For larger campaigns, we actually have the ability to tag and set that up based on different publishers and different tactics and different audiences and different mediums to help really hone in on what's driving lift and what's not, or what combinations are helping to drive lift more than others. So it happens all the time, always a more difficult conversation to have with an agency or brand or our publisher partners. However, it's always extremely informative and helpful to help figure out what may have caused this campaign to be unsuccessful in driving people in more, and have them go back to the drawing board to figure out if it's creative that needs to be changed or if it's targeting tactics, et cetera.
Right. Now, Ryan, this is a broad question that comes from the MMA. Do you consider the NinthDecimal, the LCI approach, is this a multi-touch attribution methodology that you espouse?
Yeah, that's a great question. So actually it is. We are looking at every single exposure that happens for every single unique user that's reached across the entire campaign. Understanding when someone is exposed and understanding when a visit occurs around that exposure, whether a visit occurred prior in close proximity to that exposure or after, or if there's multiple visits after, is really important to be able to utilize for attribution, to make sure that an exposure that happens at the beginning of the campaign, maybe that's not the exposure that drove someone in, but maybe the exposure that actually happened on the last day of the campaign is what should get credit. So to that, we are able to look across a campaign, across publishers, across sub-campaigns, et cetera, to help figure out what's driving the most amount of lift and figure out when those exposures are occurring that are most impactful.
Okay, good. Okay, that question is related to something that the MMA is announcing, a program called MAT, a marketing attribution think tank, and we're going to be announcing details on that on November 1st. And I'd encourage both NinthDecimal and any members of this audience today to attend that event, which will be more prominently promoted soon. But back to a couple of questions. You mentioned people visiting but not purchasing. Do you actually report how many people you see visit who ultimately do not make a purchase, or vice versa?
So the NinthDecimal visitation data is proprietary, and we're understanding who's visiting, and we have those records down to the user level. When we connect that to sales, we are matching that data to sales data provided usually by an outside partner who provides sales data, such as a Nielsen Catalina or Datalogic.
Right.
So it is a matching of who we see and when versus when a transaction was recorded. Could be through other partners, MasterCard, Cardlytics, lots of different methodologies. So our sales data is augmented to our visitation data for a combined report, but we are not directly connected to each individual user. Did that particular user visit and buy, or visit and not buy?
Okay, good. Here's a couple of in-store questions. How are you connecting in-store and offline sales to people who go in stores?
So the magic is the device ID. So when you're able to identify a user with a device ID on their phone, we can understand a visit to a store. The brands that are working with us are allowing us to place a pixel on their e-commerce conversion pages. So then when we have a visit attributed to a mobile ID, and through our device graph, we have associated online cookies, online identifiers associated with that person as well. When one of those identifiers, whether the same mobile ID or an associated online identifier, is seen making a online transaction, we get passed back the data, and we're able to say this online transaction was preceded by an in-store visit within X amount of days, 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, depending on what the advertiser wants to see. To get into specifics of what aisle were they in versus what product they buy, that's where we lean into other partners, beacon data providers. Brands have their own data that they're calling for this that gets introduced into the mix.
Yeah, that was the second part of the question coming from another person about the added value of BLA beacons. Are you using those when you can?
We are using those where we can. It's one of those things that beacon data is great for what it's used for, but it really is very tough to scale the specifics. Getting the very specifics of, send me a whole targeting segment of people who spent 3 minutes or longer in a men's shoe section. Well, a store doesn't want to give that to their competitor. So that type of data is not nearly as commoditized and available. So it augments location data and visitation data. It can give some insight into product preference and placement even without purchase data. So beacon data is like an amazing spice added to the location data mix. It really can enhance, especially a brand's first-party beacon data that they want to action against. So it's a great signal, but limited in its scale and versatility.
Great, okay. Well, thank you for that. One more question. How do you protect user privacy?
So the FTC, a number of years ago, in the world of big data, issued a concept called privacy by design. Privacy by design was sort of a mandate to the big data out there in the U.S. to make sure that companies like ours are building into our systems appropriate privacy practices. And then, so that's a mandate to self-regulate. Then from there are organizations such as the AMA, the MMA, there are a number of self-regulatory organizations that provide principles of what it means for online advertising behavior. So the ability to honor these industry self-regulatory concepts that have been created and designed based on the FTC mandate of privacy by design, we participate in these industry self-regulatory organizations which monitor our practices and ensure that we're conforming to user opt-in, user choice, the ability for the users to opt out. So we are following the practices of online advertising, targeted advertising in general, specifically for mobile and for location.
And just to add to that, because we understand people at essentially the person level, if someone opts out of saying, I don't want to be tracked on my smartphone, but doesn't do anything on their desktop, if we know that that desktop is tied to that unique person, then we can opt them out as well. So essentially, any device ID, any browser or cookie identifier that is mapped to an individual person will also be automatically opted out as well. So just wanted to throw that in there.
Good, very good stuff. Okay, that's it for the questions, folks. So I want to thank Ryan and Naftali for a very, very good presentation, very thorough, and I encourage NinthDecimal to pay close attention to our MET initiative that's, as we said, is commencing in early November. And to the audience, we hope that this particular presentation on attribution was helpful, and that you'll stay tuned to MMA for other important developments in the world of multi-touch attribution. Thank you, NinthDecimal. Thank you, Ryan and Naftali. A few more words on the MMA. We have continuing webinars. We have a webinar tomorrow brought to you by Ubimo. We have a couple of webinars next week, and then you'll see here we have webinars in late October and through the first half of November. We have a forum. We have over 20 forums around the world during the year. Our forum in Istanbul is on November 1st. Our forum in Singapore is on November 28th. And look at the MMA website for more information on our calendar of events for 2017. If you are a member of the MMA, you can take a seat at the table and join any of the programs. These are the programs that I oversee. And we welcome contributions and support from all of our members in all aspects of the ecosystem, so they can help develop best practices and guidelines for the industry. And of course, you can stay connected to industry issues by participating in the conversation, either through paying attention to some of our outputs like the Smart Brief or the guidance reports and benchmarks. You can, as a member, you can get deep access to the case study of the Mobile Marketing Playbook, but the webinar library and many of these other things are available to all, and we welcome your participation and support. And again, thank you to Ryan and Naftali. Thank you for the audience for a great turnout. And just know if your question wasn't addressed today, that the Ryan and Naftali will pay attention to those questions and get back to you with some specific answers, because I know some of you have asked for a direct follow-up. So thanks again to our presenters, and thank you, audience, for joining us today. And once again, see you tomorrow.